Alrighty, folks, let's take a look at slope rate of change. This should be review, and so we're gonna hustle through this. Those of you who are in class already saw this. Today we're gonna be talking about how to calculate slope, how to classify lines. That's a verb you wanna pay attention to so you know what that means. And then determining whether they're parallel or perpendicular based on their slope. So let's take a look. This should not be new to you. This is how you're going to calculate the slope. The slope is like the steepness, a measure of steepness. So it's going to be doing vertical change to horizontal change. Some of you might have learned it as rise over run. How far up or down does the line go as it goes across? Rise over run. So we're going to be looking at that formula again, and you need to get that back into your brain. So when you see the term classify, it's going to be asking you, what does this line do? Does this line rise, meaning it has a positive slope? Does this line fall, meaning it has a negative slope? So from left to right, it slopes downward. I want you to keep in mind that these two types of lines are called oblique, and 90% of what we do will be those. These are our exceptions over here, horizontal and vertical. And those are the ones that usually trip people up because they try to apply oblique rules to those exceptions. Okay, so here this is going to have a positive slope. This is going to have a negative slope. This is going to be classified as horizontal. And so when you are asked to classify, it's asking you what type of a line. Does it rise, fall? Is it horizontal? Or is it vertical? So I think of slope like your roof. Your roof can slope up and be positive. It can slope down and be negative, or it can go be a flat roof and have a slope of 0. When I'm calculating using my slope formula, that's going to look like 0 over a number, which if you do on your calculator is going to come out as 0. Your roof cannot be vertical. That would be really tricky to build. So the slope in that case is what we call undefined. And the reason it's undefined is when you do the slope formula, your change in y will result in a number, but your change in x will not. And so when you do that on your calculator, it's actually going to give you an error. And that is what indicates to you that that is an undefined slope. Okay, so find the slope of the line passing through the given points. I'm going to hustle through these. These are my x1, y1, x2, y2s. So I'll be taking -4 minus 1. And then I'll be taking 5 minus -5. Be really careful. The thing that'll mess you up here is actually just the positives and the negatives. I get -5 over +10. In honors math, I always have to reduce. So I get a slope of -1. And then it says tell whether the line rises, falls, or is horizontal or vertical. Since this is negative, this one falls. Alrighty. Here, when I do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, this is going to turn into 0 over 3, which is 0, totally legitimate, and then that's going to be horizontal. Here, 8 minus 2 on the top, 3 minus 3 on the bottom. I get 6 over 0. That leads to an error on my calculator, which means this is undefined slope, which means this is a vertical line. So you really want to start learning this chart. And I think this chart probably is something that I would say you want to really look at in your notes and keep track of, because that's kind of a main core concept. So, alrighty, let's roll. Find the value of k so that the line through the given points has a given slope. This is a super good question, and I would want to know how to do this before our test next week. So what do I know? I know that my slope has to be -0.25. Since slope is a ratio, I'm going to go ahead and put this in. So slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to put this in as a fraction. And then here, I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do using the formula. Y2, which is 2, minus y1, which is k, over 2k minus 2. Excuse me, minus a -2. So that actually, because the formula, remember, is this one, this x value minus this one. When I subtract a negative, that will actually turn to positive. And the reason I like to change this into a fraction, which most people love to avoid, is now I can use cross multiplication since I have a ratio. I can say 4 times 2 minus k has to equal a negative times 2k plus 2. Being careful to multiply that negative by everything. So a little distributing. Here, And here, don't forget about that negative going to everything inside of there. So now if I start to solve this, maybe I'm going to add the 2k over here. So I'm going to be at 8 minus 2k equals negative 2. Take that 8 away. Negative 2k is going to be negative 10. So my k value would have to be 5 in order to make that work. That is, again, something I would absolutely check that I understand. And so I'm going to practice this problem later and highlight that for when I come back to look at my notes for studying. Okay, another chart. We're going to change it up here and highlight this one in pink just because that's fun. But this is going to be another thing that I really need to know. It's a core concept. What makes two lines parallel? What makes two lines perpendicular? Parallel lines don't cross. The reason, okay, now I have regret about doing this because I can't see. The reason they don't cross is that they chase each other. Same rise, same run. So whatever the steepness is of this line, it's equal to this. So line 1 and line 2 have the same slope. And that's the core concept, is they have to have the same slope in order to never touch. In order to be perpendicular, which means that they cross at 90 degrees, that means one of them is going to go up, being positive. One's going to go down, so therefore negative in terms of slope. So here I have to make two changes to the slope. I have to change and make it the opposite. So if one is positive, the other one's negative. And I have to flip it over, which we like to call reciprocate because we like to be fancy in math. And so you'd have to flip that over. So say that I was given a slope of 1/2. My parallel slope would be 1/2 because they have to be the same. My perpendicular slope would be the opposite reciprocal. So flip it over and change the sign. If I was given a slope of -3, my parallel slope would be the same. My perpendicular slope would be the opposite reciprocal. So get that kind of core concept into your mind as well so that you can look back and say, that's a core concept I need to know. So here, when I'm testing to see if they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither, I'm looking at their slopes. So for line 1, I'm going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This turns into -3 over +2. I can't make a decision based on that. I just have to compare. So now I'm going to go ahead and compare that to line 2 and say line 2 has a slope of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that turns into 4 over 6, which reduces to 2/3. Well, they're clearly not equal, and so I know it's not parallel, but they are opposite reciprocals, and since they're opposite reciprocals, that makes them perpendicular. And so my answer to this first one would be that these two lines are perpendicular. Okay, here again, I'm going to take line 2 and just go ahead and do my slope. So the biggest thing here is going to be to know that on a test, when it asks you to determine if they're parallel or perpendicular or neither, that just means to go ahead and find the slopes and then compare them. So let's do line 2. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that's going to be -5 over +3. These two are the same, and therefore they are parallel. Okay, so in class, we probably didn't do this one. We're not going to do it for online either. We're trying to cut down on that. This two worksheet, if you've looked at the checklist, you are doing this one as is. So you can go